Kia ora and welcome to the Nichecache. This is our podcast coming across the interwebs to you, however you're situated, wherever you are situated. We are here because we love Aotearoa sport and we love going deep into Aotearoa's rivers, forests and estuaries about Aotearoa sport. And if we're going deep into Aotearoa sport right now, Tuesday the 9th of September, there is only one place to begin, and that is trying to conjure some mystical forces, some divine intervention at Mount Smart Stadium, the Temple of Mount Smart Stadium, because we have All Whites playing Australia tonight, Tuesday night, the day of recording. So we're balancing a tricky little time slot here, but we'll definitely be talking All Whites. And we also have a NRL finals game on Saturday, the Panthers versus the Warriors at Mount Smart Stadium. And I have come around to the belief that, and this is this is treacherous, because it's some aspects of my life have followed this this perilous path of hoping that something happens that probably isn't going to happen, right? Because the best way I can think for the Warriors to win this game is to go super duper funky. We need some offloads. We need speed. We need creativity. We need flair to break down the Penrith Panthers. And on, I think it might have been Sunday morning, I made a little video, had my positive goggles on for the Warriors, and I laid out some selection moves that could help spice up this Warriors team. They need Sam Healey in the team. I think they need Taintua Piki in the team. They need Aaron Clark to be their best player against the Panthers. They need attacking flair, razzle-dazzle funk, something exciting, not only to break down the Panthers, but also to inspire the home crowd and fight off the bad omens of Mount Smart Stadium, none of which I actually think is going to happen. So it's a weird spot where the best way I can think to beat the Panthers as a Warriors, best way I can think of for the Warriors to beat the Panthers is probably not going to happen, because Andrew Webster will not go super duper funky. He won't make brave selection calls, and I don't think he's going to give the team the license to get creative in breaking down the Penrith Panthers. And then, much like the All Whites coming up against Australia, but I think the All Whites have actually been a bit closer, because they only lost 1-0 in the first game of this little series. I don't think they've lost to Australia conceding like 4 goals or 5 goals. They haven't been smoked in their recent games against Australia. They haven't won any games, but I don't think they have been smoked. And the Warriors haven't necessarily been smoked by the Panthers, but there is a theme in the games against the Panthers, as well as their recent mahi to finish the season. The finals game in Penrith, 2023, the Warriors lost 6 points to 32. So the Panthers scored 32 points. 2025 at Mount Smart Stadium earlier this year, one of the 4, maybe 5 losses in which the Warriors lost at Mount Smart in front of their biggest crowds this season, the Panthers scored 28 points. Then, the last 2 games of the season, the Warriors lost, and they conceded 26 and 27 points. Their season average for points conceded is 20.66. And that's in the low 20s, because they had a lot of losses, like 18 points conceded, 24 points conceded, 22 points conceded, and so on. When they're playing the Dragons, 10 points conceded. But when they're playing the Panthers, they have conceded they conceded 32 in In a finals game in 2023, they conceded 28 earlier this year at Mount Smart Stadium, and then they conceded 26 and 27, all of which are significantly higher than their season average this season. And I can't really see the Warriors stopping the Panthers from scoring over 25 points, right? So then we need to think about the Warriors scoring over 25 points. That's where we got to get funky. That's where we got to get creative. And all of this is coming together for a realistic prediction that the Warriors seem like they're going to lose this game. But that's where we get into the divine intervention of Mount Smart Stadium. That's where we conjure a miracle. And to be honest, no pressure on the All Whites, but it starts with the All Whites tonight against Australia at Mount Smart Stadium.
Yeah, well, this trend of defeats when we get massive crowds at Mount Smart Stadium, I have been reliably informed that they're trending, like they're expecting at least 20,000 on a Tuesday night for the All Whites game. So there's probably going to be walk-ups. I think they're going to get a fairly significant crowd there off the buzz of the All Whites, having played a few games in Aotearoa recently as well, getting plenty of like momentum that way, qualifying for the World Cup. The fact it's against Australia, the fact probably also, like, even though I expect most, a lot of people would have got tickets well in advance, it's also the case that they did play really well on Friday. So whatever's left, like, there's encouragement to go and see if they can do a little bit better this time around. But yeah, haven't beaten Australia at football, men's or women's internationals, actually, since 2002, I think. It was at Mount Smart. Mentioned this last week. It was at Mount Smart the last time they won. Ryan Nelson scored the winner in a 1-0 victory to, I think, it was like an Oceania Nations Cup situation before Australia joined the Asia Confederation. So there is some history there. They have a good record at Mount Smart against Australia. I think I worked it out. It's like 3 wins, 3 draws, 1 defeat through history at this ground. But they also haven't even scored a goal against the Aussies for like 15 years. It's not just that they've lost, I think, 6 or 7 games in a row now against them. It's also they haven't even scored in the most recent 4 of those. So, let alone, obviously, if you're losing them all, you haven't kept clean sheets. So there is some parallels what you're saying there about can the All Whites keep Australia from scoring against them? Like, well, actually, based on what we saw on Friday, yeah, maybe. Like, if they'd been able to keep their best team on the pitch for 90 minutes rather than sort of 60 minutes and then having to rotate because guys have got to be protected, partly preserving them for tonight's game, partly like just because you can't make Chris Wood play 180 minutes on the other side of the world and fly back and play super intense Premier League games. He's just going to get injured if you do that. So you do have to keep the bigger picture in mind with that stuff. Maybe they could have, they only conceded in the 87th minute in that one, but it's still like, it felt, and we'll probably talk about this a bit later, I guess, in more detail about the game itself, but it did feel like it fitted into the pattern of All Whites just don't seem to be able to get past Australia in these games, which hopefully they will, yes, divine intervention, like we'll shatter that one tonight. We'll break that open, clear the path for the Warriors to also walk through that door and then, keep the good vibes at Mount Smart going on. Auckland FC will be starting their season soon, so they can pick up where these guys left off and everything will be hunky-dory. But yeah, that's something's got to... We need that first spark, we need that first like godly spark to get there, because the forces don't seem to be in favor one way or another of the correct outcomes in these games. So yeah, prayers up. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers to both of them.
I was thinking more along the lines of like blood magic. And
yeah, like that's better. Let's do something a little more ritualistic and actually not just sit back and hope.
Let's not, because if we're talking blood magic, then we're talking human sacrifice, and I had to kind of...
Well, I wasn't going that far.
Well, that is
scratch your hand or something.
Yeah, the old mafia initiation.
Write a note in a letter or something with you. Yeah, it's not like go decapitations in the volcano.
No, if you got a goat sacrifice them to the gods in honor of the Warriors. Definitely don't do that. Don't hurt your animals, and do not hurt any fellow human beings just for the Warriors. I think we can deal with a Warriors loss, a predicted Warriors loss, instead of hurting other people in sacrificial capacities just to get a win for the Warriors. And another weird thing is that so we've talked a lot about the Warriors' home record, specifically at Mount Smart, but the Warriors women, they've also lost their 3 games in Hamilton so far this season. They've had really good crowds in Hamilton, but they've lost all 3 of those games, and they have a 1-4 record at home. So I think they're 1-1 at Mount Smart Stadium. Then they've lost all 3 games in Hamilton. So it's pretty clear that the bad juju for the Warriors as an organization in home games this year stretches. It's like the old Taniwha. It's gone from it's entering the Waikato River on the southern territory of Auckland. It just flows all the way to Hamilton, and it's a rugby league losing Taniwha. So that's not working in favour of the Warriors here. And they have a very difficult matchup against the Panthers, as do the All Whites up against Australia, and we'll be going deeper into all of that. But we can get a bit of mindfulness, considering we've already tainted our serenity with even the brief notion of sacrifice for a Warriors win. So bring me back to some sensible jibber jabber.
Well, the Warriors and an All Whites win. We're trying. We're going for everything there.
We've only got by the time this is up, this is live record, and this is published. Then
True.
people
we're not giving
only have
people a lot of time to prepare.
Yeah, they only have a few hours to sort out their sacrifice. You need a few hours to find someone or something that is willing to be sacrificed, and then you got to do it. Like that's a process that could take a couple of days. So I don't want to rush anyone through that process for the All Whites, but and I definitely don't want anyone to be sacrificing anything for the Warriors. Kind of because I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah, and based on the sort of totality of the season, like a battling first round exit against a Panthers side whose second half of the season has been pretty excellent, like getting back to where they used to. I don't think that's like an unfair reflection of how their season has gone. It's probably about where they are,
And there's always next season. So
and
why
next year's the year?
Yeah, why waste your sacrifice when there's always next season?
Yeah, something for Luke Metcalf and Mitch Barnett. Like, let them enjoy the fun when they're back. Well, how about a bit of Friedrich Nietzsche then too? I would say this is a good way of avoiding going down the path where you suddenly start feeling like human sacrifice or even animal sacrifice is a possibility. He said, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. If you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you." So yeah, stay clear of that dark stuff altogether.
Yeah. In defense, I have been listening to A Song of Ice and Fire, where there is a bit of blood magic, there is a bit of sacrifice. So definitely not. That's not something I just thought of as I was walking around. As I was doing my grocery shopping or mowing the lawns or whatever. It's
someone cut you off in traffic, and suddenly that's the idea that there's a source.
Wait, go back to your mindfulness. There were two parts there. So there was the monsters and the abyss, which were packaged together, but they actually seem very different. So can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you.
Got a fair amount of
what happens when you do become the monster is...
Well, Hopefully not, because I've got a lot of experience with the abyss, and I have gazed into the abyss. The abyss has gazed back at me, and in the stillness of the abyss, a lot of growth, a lot of personal development, a lot of ascension, a lot of getting better as a human being. So I don't mind the abyss, but you can't be lost in the abyss. You still need your awareness, you still need your discipline and your positive mindset, even though you know you're in the abyss, even though you're aware that you are in the abyss, you can still have control of yourself and your mind and use that for your own benefit. But the other one, hunting monsters only to become the monster, I think is quite relevant for a lot of the world's situations. And I think there's a lot of
one in
people,
particular, which I won't mention.
there's a lot of people also who think they're doing like they're hunting the monsters for the greatest good, but they're not aware that they have become the monster. And then they just become a shit person themselves. Maybe it's quite similar. And this yesterday in the newsletter, thenichecache.substack.com, my musical jam was the old chorus song, Pole, 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 politician, can you make a right decision? A lot of people, I believe, enter politics for the greater good. They're hunting the monster. They're trying to do the best for their country, for their community, and all this stuff. But then they just become a politician. And they become the monster because politicians don't do jack shit. Everyone knows that. And it's just a career path in which you don't actually really help anyone. You've just got a job. And your job is being a politician, but you enter it with all these positive notions like, well, I'm going to save my community, I'm going to hunt the monsters, and I'm going to do good, but then you just become the thing that you're hunting.
Yeah, there's a Frank Capra film from like 85 years ago with Jimmy Stewart in it called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which is basically about exactly that, except at the end, of course, he doesn't become part of the machine. He doesn't fall for the corruption. He stands up there filibustering to the point of literal exhaustion until he finally wins. And of course, that's just a movie. So generally in real life, you don't get the happy ending, and you do just get the like sliding into position and replacing the last guy and whatever. Yeah, but that's one element. We don't have to do that. We don't have to become the monster ourselves in whatever our own chosen professions or just in our general lives happen to be.
Did I read correctly that Paul Ifill has coached 3 consecutive Chatham Cup championships?
That is true. Paul Ifill, along with his right-hand man, Ifill Kainu, who, together they coached Christchurch United to the 2023 title. They beat Melville on penalties in that final. They coached Wellington Olympic to the 2024 Chatham Cup title. They beat Auckland City on penalties in that one. They got their penalty shootout out of the way this year in the semi-finals, beating Eastern Suburbs. That was the one we had a good laugh about with all the kids behind the goal. That was classic New Zealand football areas. Love that stuff, which allowed them to put in a pretty dominant overall performance, I thought, in the Chatham Cup on Sunday, where they won 4-2 against Auckland United. So yes, that is 3 in a row for Ifill and Kainu as coaches in general, not just like 2 in a row for Wellington Olympic, but 3 in a row for them together. And I think it is now 19 games unbeaten in that competition, which is like, they'll pick that up next year. And they'll pick that up, obviously, in the early rounds of the Cup, where they're likely to go a little bit further because they are defending champs. They are very good. That's probably, that streak's likely to get extended a little bit as well. It's probably already a New Zealand record, although it's very hard to tell because there's just not consistent data going back for the 100+ years of Chatham Cup history. But yeah, pretty incredible, especially considering there's only one other club that has gone back-to-back in the Chatham Cup this millennium. That was Kashmir Tech, did it in 20 2013, 2014, which Paul Ifill was well aware of because he mentioned it in the pre-game interview, which I got to help the microphone out in front of him for that. So I definitely noted that, where it's like he knew his history. He had prepared, like he was well aware of that stuff, to roll that stat out. So like, yeah, incredible achievement from Ifill there as coach. So certainly something that we should be, and which we are applauding here on the podcast.
Do you think it's more a case of, or is it like equal parts Paul Ifill being a ridiculously good coach, or he has hopped around a few really good teams? Because Wellington Olympic, they've kind of been a powerhouse of Aotearoa domestic football before Paul Ifill was involved. So what is Paul Ifill the greatest coach in New Zealand, or is this like a nice little marriage between a really good up and coming coach and really good footballing systems?
I think there's a little bit of both. I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but I do think there is a bit of like, it's probably a little bit more on the side of he's coached two of the very best teams in the country. Like you kind of have to be at that type of club to be winning the Chatham Cup anyway. So like that is certainly part of it. Wellington Olympic they've won 5 Central League titles in a row. So they'd won 3 before he turned up 2 years ago. He's continued that. Like they haven't gotten any worse under him. They've won a couple of Chatham Cups, which they weren't doing previously. So he's continued, perhaps even added to their, certainly added to to the legacy, to the dynasty. He is also, though, coaching, the Christchurch United is included in this. Like he's coaching like some of the best players in the domestic scene at clubs that already knew how to win beforehand. But I don't know, cup ties can be frisky like that, and the favorites don't always win those games. And I certainly think there's a lot of credit that has to go. This is what I'm saying is this is a measure as well of like the quality of him as a young coach too, is that he has been able to consistently get his guys up for these games to win penalty shootouts in each of those 3 seasons as well. Like that's not a fluke. It might sound like a fluke, but it's not. If you're winning 3 out of 3, like that's a team that is well prepared and knows how to handle those situations. And yeah, even just some of the stuff he said in that little pre-game chat about like just having the guys prepared and focus on this game, like just the perspective that he's able to bring. Like he played in an FA Cup final back in England. He did this as a player as well. He's a legend of the Wellington Phoenix, perhaps the legend of the Wellington Phoenix. So yeah, I think both of those things apply in this little coaching dynasty.
On the women's side, the Shephard Cup, Auckland United are doing a bit of a dynasty. So do we have basically 2 dynasties going on here? Wellington Olympic back-to-back and Auckland United back-to-back?
Also back-to-back. Yeah, they won last year. In fact, they've won 3 of the last 4.
Bang.
Their squad on Sunday, I think, had 7 starters in common with last year's, which in New Zealand football, like domestically, that's quite a lot of consistency. You often do get quite a lot of movement between, and I mean the best clubs are better able to retain their players, but also the best clubs are better able to like sign the best available players from elsewhere. So like Auckland United had that spine, had that core of good, solid, experienced players from last year's championship team, but then also have been able to add like Ava Collins, New Zealand international, scored a couple goals in that game. Zoe McMeekin had a strong game playing at fullback. She's just been released by the Wellington Phoenix, so she's popped up here. Like, or someone perhaps less renowned on the same level, but Zoe Benson, who was outstanding for Eastern Suburbs the last couple of years, New Zealand age grade international, I think at an under-17 World Cup last year, perhaps. I think she's about 19 now. Might have been the year before then. She's come across from Eastern Suburbs, so joined like a star youngster at one of their main rivals, come across to Auckland United. She scored the penalty that got them started against the Phoenix Reserves on Sunday. So like, yeah, similar to, I actually thought both those games were really quite similar in how they unfolded, where you get the favorite team who has this core of players that have been around winning trophies for several years, including some really good experience in there. Coaches who've done it before as well, and Ifill and also Ben Bate with Auckland United, they score early on both occasions. They concede an equalizer in the sort of like halfway through the first half on both occasions. Then they score again to be leading at halftime, and then they kind of just like put their foot down and take control in the second half as their class and experience and game management comes to the fore. Both of them scored 4 goals, and yeah, we had consecutive winners in both of the New Zealand national cups. So the Chatham Cup, back-to-backs there with Wellington Olympic, just the second team this century to do that. And Auckland United is a little bit more common on the women's side. We've had a few more sort of like cream rises to the tops type club situations in the past. So there've been a couple more of those kind of teams who have had these kinds of runs, but certainly at the moment, Auckland United are that team. They've won three Kate Shepherd Cups in the last 4 years. The team from 4 years ago that won has almost nothing in common with the current team, except for I think Jess Philpott's still around. But yeah, like the team from the last couple years has a lot of continuity, and you remember they won basically everything last year. I think they did win everything last year. But they had a bit of a setback last week because they just needed to beat Fencibles to win and yet another league title, and they didn't. They lost 2-1, so they were upset there and allowed West Coast Rangers to swoop through and take the league title. They'll still be able to try and defend their Chatham Cup as their National League title coming up because they've won 2 in a row. Will be going for the three-peat. Did win the Champions League as well, the Oceania Champions League. So they've defended 2 of their 4 titles from last season this year. They missed out on 1. They've still got the National League coming up. They are the best team in the country. And if there was any doubt about that after how they slipped up in the league last week, well, they reaffirmed that with a dominant win over the Wellington Phoenix Reserves on Sunday in the Kate Shepherd Cup final.
We also have New Zealand Day cricket. And some funky stuff happening here because we've got New Zealand A playing a first-class game, the old unofficial test match, long-form game.
AKA a first-class game.
Just a regular old first-class game. I think it's also a 4-dayer. Might be a 5-day, actually. Because it's an unofficial test match. In a bilateral cricket series. New Zealand A batting first, 607 for 7 declared. And South Africa are currently 137 for 3. Interestingly, the South African spinner Sipho Ndwandwe, he took all 7 wickets for South Africa. And the 2 wicket takers for New Zealand are both seamers. So the spinner took all the wickets for South Africa. Seamers have taken the wickets for New Zealand A. But we got Reece Murray, 249 runs. Dale Phillips, 103 runs. Joe Carter, 57 runs. Mitch Hay, 71 not out. And some really helpful knocks there as well. Simon Keane down the order, 44 runs. Strike rate of 183. That's the second monster knock. Well, he's got a few of them so far. Simon Keane coming into the team. And he scored a 37 with a strike rate of 119 in the first of his one-dayers, and then he hit 77 with a strike rate of 133. So Simon Keane's come into the New Zealand Days setup, and he's just smashing it down the order, which is great to see. We've also got Joe Carter, 57 runs. The funky thing about Joe Carter is that he scored 2 centuries in 3 games for New Zealand A in India back in 2022, averaged 69.4 in that series. In Bangladesh earlier this year, 2 games, 3 innings, 2 50s, averaging 45. Now he's got another 50. So if we just put the spotlight on Joe Carter for New Zealand A, 2 centuries and 5 innings back in India, 2 50s and 3 innings in Bangladesh, and he started this first-class series with a knock of 57. All right, that's cool. Simon Carter. He seems like a C-D-list celebrity in New Zealand. Like just saying that name, thought like he might have been famous. But Simon Keane, he's come in, he's smashing it. Great stuff. Joe Carter, classy as always, the Northern District's veteran. But with Dale Phillips, what's Dale Phillips done? He's got back-to-back centuries in his homeland. 147 in the last one-dayer, and he gave it a royal tonking in that innings. 135 strike rate. 147 and 135 strike rate, and he followed it up with another century, 103 opening the batting, and of course, Reece Madu. 249 runs at the top of the order. I think this is Reece Madu's second double century.
Yeah, he got one for Canterbury, didn't he?
Yeah, 240. So Reece Madu is a 23-year-old, and he's already got at least 2 double centuries in first-class batting. So that's pretty useful as well. Any other wrinkles here? Mitchell Hay, his 71 not out was pretty cool. Just found his way into the innings and then started to have a whack, as Mitch Hay does tend to do. He is pretty good at whacking the ball. He just hasn't scored enough runs for the Blackcaps to be a significant factor, but he also scored an 81 in Bangladesh, so he's got 250s in 3 first-class games so far for New Zealand A. The thing that I've been thinking a lot about, though, is, and we'll get onto these groups later on, my 5x5 Blackcaps groups. One of those groups is the emerging batters. And in that group, this is my ranking, maybe. I've got Mohamed Abbas, Bevan Jacobs, Reece Madu, Dale Phillips, Curtis Heafy. Because Curtis Heafy was also doing some good stuff in the one-day series, and he scored 32 in his innings of the first-class game. First of all, cool, 5 groups, 5 batters right there, emerging batters. Do you have a favourite? Mohamed Abbas, Bevan Jacobs, Reece Madu, Dale Phillips, Curtis Heafy?
Yeah, Reece Madu, I think, specifically because he feels like he was playing the one-day games on this tour, but he feels like someone whose avenue into international cricket is Test match opener, and it just feels like such an important specialist position, and one which, like, you know, at some point soon we're going to need that. They're already shuffling it around a little bit with, like, because I don't think anyone would say that Devon Conway or Will Young are specialist Test match opening batters. They're kind of like, they've adapted their games to do that role to get into teams. Tom Latham certainly is, and he's been around for a long time, but we've talked about how he's perhaps, like, the last year or two, his numbers have dipped a bit. Certainly his average is dipping a little bit more than what it has done in the past. So that feels like a position which is not really available internationally right now, but could be soon. And to have someone ready to go in such a crucial spot in the Test team, like to have someone who is going to be allowed to have a couple of years playing these A stuff, playing, you know, a lot of cricket, and for his for his domestic team, and just really given the room to get his game exactly right, to be ready to go in that exact moment when that opportunity comes around. That feels very important. Whereas those other guys are sort of all also like top level prospects, but I think a couple of them have already played for New Zealand, and they're kind of available in all of the formats. So they're going to, like, they're already getting opportunities for the Blackcaps. It's not quite as much of a sort of like made to order kind of development thing as Mariu's is, which is why I find his that specialist status a little bit more funky. But like, I say that he might easily just like play an ODI for the Blackcaps over the summer. You know, that also could just happen.
He already has.
He already has.
And
that's right. He already has. Yeah.
He's already got it. He already has an ODI. He's already got an ODI 50, and that ODI 50, I'm pretty sure it came with a decent strike rate. I would like to confirm it, but I don't know if I can do that super duper quickly. Let's go. 58 versus Pakistan. Strike rate of 95, which was lower than the strike rate for his double century in South Africa. So he had 249 runs at a strike rate of 96.5.
Really?
That, like, Reece Madu isn't a slugger. He's not a T20 slugger. Like, he kind of isn't that good at T20 batting. But he just hit 249 runs at a strike rate of 96.5. And the beautiful thing is, he does have two double centuries as a 23-year-old. And both of those double centuries, he's playing reverse sweeps. Like, there's reverse sweep highlights in those clips of his double centuries, as well as regular sweeps, good pull shots, and everything else.
On drives.
Yeah, everything.
Love those on drives, mate.
But the thing that I was thinking about, so we've got those 5, like, Abasta is my most aesthetically pleasing batter. I think, Jacobs is the best T20 batter, right? Madu's the best first-class batter. Like, there's so many different ways you can slice it, but Phillips and Heafy are factors. Like, they've pushed their way into that group. Like, Phillips has done better for New Zealand A than Mohamed Abbas. Curtis Heafy has been checking off development boxes over the last year as well. So I do want to make sure that Phillips and Heafy are viewed in that category simply because they have scored so many runs to put themselves in that category. And that is just another example of the depth available in the Blackcaps batting pipeline and cricket pipeline generally. Another little cricket quick hitter is Molly Penfold playing in the CPL, and I think the White Ferns, ODI World Cup squad is going to be announced over the next few days. Hopefully not while we are recording this, but I don't know if it's a good sign for Molly Penfold that she's in the Caribbean Premier League and maybe not going to be selected for the White Ferns. I don't know if her being in the Caribbean Premier League means she's not going to be selected for the White Ferns or what's happening there. But she has no wickets in her 2 games so far, 7.1 RPO, and this means that Molly Penfold has not taken a wicket in her last 6 games of cricket. And she also scored 0 runs in her last 3 innings batting. So there's a lot of zeros there for Molly Penfold, which I don't think is good. She's got 4 wickets in her last 10 games, which includes White Ferns and some domestic cricket last summer. But just another quirky little cricket note there for Molly Penfold, who, in theory, she should be in the White Ferns World Cup squad. But I kind of prefer Brie Illing, but that's just something that we'll be tracking when the White Ferns World Cup squad is announced. And speaking of cups, a lot of cup action for our podcast today, but the New Zealand men's under-16 basketball team, and this gets into some junior tiers that we don't usually cover. And we don't need to go in depth about the New Zealand under-16 basketball team, but they did finish 3rd at their under-16 Asia Cup. And this is something that I created a few weeks ago, that New Zealand is a top 5 basketball nation in Asia. And I think I'm even more correct than I was then. Right now, because the men's under-16 team just finished 3rd in their Asia Cup. The men's team finished 4th in their Asia Cup. The women's team featured 5th in their Asia Cup. And as we know, the men under-19 team finished 4th in the whole wide world. So right there, you've got a recipe for New Zealand being a top 5 basketball nation in Asia, which doesn't get any less crazy every time I say it, because Asia's a pretty big place and Asia loves basketball. But here's little old New Zealand being a top 5 basketball nation in Asia, reinforced by the New Zealand under-16 team winning a bronze medal, finishing 3rd in their Asia Cup.
Yeah, and like the Tall Blacks, Tall Ferns, they didn't even have the best teams there at those Asia Cups, and they still managed to do everything that they needed in order to progress in, well, for the Tall Ferns case, it was to progress in World Cup qualifying. For the Tall Blacks, it didn't actually matter. They were just there for the ride. Their World Cup qualifying stuff happened separately, but yeah, a fifth and a fourth for them with what were clearly like under strength squads, missing a lot of their key players. No dramas. I'm sure other teams had some similar issues, but ours were fairly significant and didn't slow them down at all. Still went out there and got I mean that's what, 4 FIBA events that New Zealand basketball has competed in this year. Either FIBA, the Under-19 World Cup, and then 3 FIBA Asia events. Top 5 in all of them, semi-finals in 3 out of the 4. There have been 1 or 2 events that went down, like there was an Under-19 Women's World Cup. We weren't part of that because we didn't qualify. So we maybe need to, we didn't qualify because we didn't do as well at the Under-18 Women's Asia Cup, but that was last year. But 2024 stuff isn't quite the same. 2025, well, actually, some of that, now that I think of it, I mean, 2024, we also had the men's under-18s finishing, I think, second at the Asia Cup, which is how they qualified for that under-19 World Cup. And we also had a 4th place finish at the men's under-17 World Cup, which is what we've just qualified for again by the men's under-16s getting as far as they did. So, come to think of it, where this streak actually rolls a bit further back than I initially thought. I was just looking at what they've done this year, but last year was pretty glowing as well, pretty spectacular. At that under-16 Asia Cup, in the newsletter was that in the paid section? No, I think it was in the open section. And on Monday, I did chuck out like the stats so people can have a peek there and have a look at like catch some names. Who do I recognize from the pizza NBL and stuff like that. So there's like, I mean, the track record of the last couple of years shows that the players who make these age grade teams are supreme talents. Like the last couple have been the case. There's no reason to think this one won't be the case, given that we got a 3rd place finish there. Tuffany Kate, though, is probably the guy to pay the closest attention to, because he's already played a fair bit for the Canterbury Rams, and that's a winning Canterbury Rams team. His coach there, Quinn Clinton, was on the coaching staff for this under-16 Asia Cup stuff. He was selected to the All-Star 5 for the tournament, alongside 2 guys from Australia, alongside 2 guys from, was it China, I think? Whoever it was that beat them in the semi-finals wrote it down there. So basically 4 players who made the final. He was the only player who didn't make the final who got into that All-Star 5. So that is a pretty glowing recommendation. You chuck that on your CV when you're applying to USA colleges in a couple of years.
I have been thinking of like, how can I say something funny about Steven Adams and a no-show job? But I don't know. I just couldn't find anything quite funny. Like he's not going to have a no-show job for like beef. Like he's going to show up and he's going to eat some beef. That's what he does. That's what he does in his spare time. So he's not going to.
He drinks his milk.
Yeah, like
he's got a farm, so he probably helps produce that milk.
If a sponsor is paying Steven Adams, I'd assume that sponsor is something that Steven Adams already consumes and is going to enjoy consuming even more. It's like the Kawhi Leonard situation. The Pablo Torre finds out video. They broke down like some of the personalities involved, and Kawhi Leonard, he just ate off like coupons. Like he had Wingstop coupons that he was getting, and then he stopped eating at Wingstop because he stopped getting the coupons for there. And I was like, that does seem like something Steven Adams would do. Like he's going to find a sponsor for something that he already enjoys, and then he's going to consume that for free. And I think that's literally what happens, because he eats mince for breakfast and he probably drinks a lot of milk. So he's already doing that. The other stuff, like $48 million to do nothing, that doesn't sound like something Steven Adams would do. But I do think the Houston Rockets owner, Fertitta, he's like a casino restaurant type of cat.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And what is Steven Adams? Steven Adams might not like gambling, so that's all good. But Steven Adams loves eating. Steven Adams loves drinking, probably non-alcoholic beverages, maybe alcoholic beverages. So I think
I've heard stories of him sinking Guinness, which sounds about right. Because if you're going to be on the alcoholic beverages, which is probably really only an off-season thing for him, Guinness is like drinking metal, like drinking pure iron. That's some heavy stuff.
I mean, some beef.
Not in terms of alcohol content so much as like literal, like the thickness of the liquid itself.
What would you like? There's nothing that sounds more delightful than some mince and Guinness for breakfast.
Probably would be my first choice, but I can appreciate this.
Light, nutritious, vital, just Guinness and beef. That's the old Steven Adams recipe for success. So shout out to Steven Adams doing things the wholesome way, and shout out to anyone who has a no-show job because I do remember a few scenes on The Sopranos where they had their no-show jobs and they just show up to the construction site and sit in deck chairs all day. And that I was like, wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind it a old school mafia no-show job. That would be pretty cool. But that's the extent of my NBA dramas knowledge. Rugby league. I do want to roll through some women's stuff quickly. We had the Warriors women's lost to the Broncos, and that's understandable. It is a bummer that the Warriors have lost all their games in Hamilton, but the Broncos are really good. Gail Broughton, fantastic. Mele Hufunga, solid as always. Kerry Johnson on the wing did her job. You got Brianna Clark still competing for a Kiwi Ferns middle forward role. And Azalea Maka made her debut. She's from Gisborne. There was also a debut for Fane Finau from Aotearoa. She debuted for the Knights at edge forward, and she's an interesting player because a lot of the Bulldogs players, Fane Finau was recruited from New Zealand into the Knights system. She played like under 19s, and she's playing reserve grade now. Then she's playing NRLW. So she was recruited and then developed by the Knights from Auckland. So that's good to see Fane Finau climbing away through the Knights system, and the Knights had a narrow victory. A little bit of last-minute shenanigans there to get the win, try from Jesse Southwell. But that Knights team is full of talent, Aotearoa talent as well. Shanice Parker, Tanika Willison, Tiana Davison, Fane Finau, all playing in that game, so that was cool for them. There's also a win for the Bulldogs. Sorry, Fane Finau just casually had 7 tackle breaks on debut, a try, 114 meters, 9.5 meters per run. So that was an excellent performance on debut for Fane Finau. And of course, Maka got the win for the Broncos in her debut. The Bulldogs win over the Sharks was a bit of an upset. And obviously the Bulldogs are full of players from Aotearoa. They had Monica Tangawai at centre. She's from Wellington, former Black Fern, and I think she had her best game of the season. 14 runs, 10.4 meters per run, 8 tackle breaks out at centre. Also in that Bulldogs team, Moana Kortene, Samina Lokatui, Ash Quinlan, Alexis Taueniai, Shannon Muru, Shanice Monshell, Angelina Tiakaranga Katoa, and Maatuleo Fotu Moala. All played in that game for the Bulldogs, who had a very impressive upset win over the Sharks. Cowboys had another win, and that's good because Rosie Kelly actually played that game, and she was at halfback, her first start at halfback for the Cowboys. So that was very impressive, and it's a good little salute to some Aotearoa Kiwi Ferns halves depth because Gail Broughton has continued her development as a half for the Broncos. So the Kiwi Ferns are building out their halves. I think let me check in. I didn't see the Cowboys Dragons game, so I'll see if Racine McGregor was starting in that game. No, she didn't play that game. So Tyler King has been playing as a utility for the Sharks, and Racine McGregor didn't play this week, but you still had Rosie Kelly, Gail Broughton, Ash Quinlan starting in the halves this round in NRLW. Of course, we got Patricia Maliepo starting in the halves for the Warriors, but there's this growing group of players who I expect to play for Samoa and Tonga. And this is the beautiful thing about the Women's Rugby League's growth in Aotearoa. So like Monica Tangawai, I think she's Samoan, so she's a good option there. Patricia Maliepo, Tongan. Moana Kotene, Tongan. Whanewhinau, Tongan. Lavinia Tauhala Liku for the Warriors, Tongan. Patricia Maliepo, Tongan. Ivana Lauatiti. I don't think she is going to play for the Kiwi Ferns because the Kiwi Ferns have a lot of middle forward depth. So someone like Ivana Lauatiti could play for Samoa. And there's a lot of those players who are going to, like with the men, where you got a lot of interesting decisions to be made. Now we're getting into that situation for the women as well, because all of these NRL wahine from Aotearoa do have very diverse cultural backgrounds. There's a lot of Warriors players who could play for the Kiwi Ferns. Like Peyton Taki Moana's been fantastic, but the Kiwi Ferns have a lot of outside back depth. I think Taira Wetere has a big future in rugby league. A lot of outside back depth for the Kiwi Ferns. So, and then you get into the middle forwards like Ashley Matapo, who might be eligible for Samoa as well. Fotu Moala, another Fotu Moala sister. She seems likely to represent Tonga with her other sister who's playing for the Bulldogs. The players that I keep thinking about for the Kiwi Ferns with the Warriors, though, is Shakira Baker, who had her best game of the season against the Broncos playing as an edge forward, and also Kaya Atai, who has played for the Cook Islands, I believe. She's been fantastic all season. Started the season as an edge forward, played centre, and now she's playing as a middle forward. So I do love the work of Kaya Atai for the Warriors. But ultimately, the Kiwi Ferns top tier group is pretty settled. So I don't see a lot of new players coming into that team, even though you've got a big influx of new players from Aotearoa with the Warriors returning and also the Bulldogs entering the competition with a whole bunch of players from Aotearoa in their squad. Shout out to some bottom 8 NRL teams. The Knights. They love Aotearoa and they finished last in the NRL. Now we know Leo Thompson's going to the Bulldogs next season. Dylan Brown's moving from the Eels to the Knights. Fascinating situation there. I should have started with the Dolphins because the Knights leads into one other thing I was saying. But the Knights do have a lot of juniors from Aotearoa in their system, but they also just have a lot of weird shit going on. And it's always been confusing to me how the Knights can do such a good job of recruiting from Aotearoa. And a lot of those players play most of the NRL football at other teams. Stafford Toa, Sami Sasangi, Leo Thompson now going to the Bulldogs. And also you've got this young half, Hami Loza, who's going to join the Panthers next season, initially recruited by the Knights. Hold that thought. And now you've got the Knights stinking. So the Knights love recruiting from Aotearoa. They have very good recruitment development systems, but their best Kiwi-NRL juniors leave and play more football at other teams, and the Knights suck. So it's just a very strange mix. And you throw in that Whanewhinau situation. She's one of the few players from Aotearoa recruited into an Australian system, And of course, the Knights women's team has a few players from Aotearoa as well. So the Knights, as an organisation, I appreciate their love for Aotearoa, but there's a few weird shenanigans going on there. And then the Dolphins, who are pretty good this season, and they just have a lot of players from Aotearoa full stop, and they don't have that goofy Knight stuff going on. My players in my Kiwis mixer from the Dolphins right now, Jermaine Sako, Cody Nikarima, Jeremy Marshall King, and Oblix Tuffa. I think Oblix Tuffa might be a sneaky Kiwis contender if there's some depth challenge. And we've had some of those things sorted out, like Jerome Hughes injured, Nelson Asafa Solomona, silly bugger, so he might not be there. Brandon Smith, silly bugger, so he might not be there. Some of those things. Xavier Willison, Kiwis potential, international potential with Cook Islands. He's injured. So some of those, that depth will be challenged and tested. But the Dolphins also have like Tafita Nofahu's from Aotearoa, and he's probably going to play for Tonga. Connolly Lemuelu, he's from Auckland, Tangaroa College. He's probably going to play for Samoa. The Dolphins also have John Whinianga Nofo. He is a utility in their system. They got Elijah Rasmussen, who's a big bopper in their system. They got Sebastian Sua, who was recruited by the Knights and then made a mid-season switch to the Dolphins, having debuted for the Knights. So Sebastian Sua is a prime example of that goofy Knights shit. Because he debuted for the Knights, now he's with the Dolphins to finish the season. He played for North Devils on the weekend. So, in that bottom 8, the Dolphins and the Knights do the most recruitment from Aotearoa, but I have a lot more faith in that Dolphins Kiwi-NRL pipeline than I do for the Knights. I mentioned Hami Loza, very talented half from Aotearoa, who's now joined the Panthers. And we enter this Panthers Warriors stuff with there's a lot of connections between the Panthers and the Warriors. Now, of course, the Clearys, the Websters, the Fisher Harris, Isaiah Papali'i, all that stuff is obvious. But there's been some very interesting, the way I described it in our newsletter, thenichecache.substack.com, fully free, Monday and Thursday, full of New Zealand sports information. And if you appreciate our work and you want a little bit extra, you can upgrade to a paid Substack subscription. You can join us on Patreon to fund our work. You can donate through Buy Me a Coffee. You can be here listening to us. It's all good as well. The way I describe the connection between the Warriors and the Panthers is they seem to be sharing a junior talent in good faith. So the Warriors, before signing Jet Cleary, they signed Luke Hanson. Both of them are halves from Penrith. At the same time, or around that time, the Warriors got Dayon Amatuanai back from the Panthers, because Preston, Riki and Dayon Amatuanai were in the Warriors system. Then they went to the Warriors Redcliffe checkpoint, transition facility, and then they joined the Panthers from the Warriors Redcliffe transitional facility. Amatuanai came back to the Warriors from the Panthers. Maybe Preston Riki does the same, who knows? So those two went that way. Then last summer, Siale Whaiamani went from the Warriors to the Panthers. And he went from the Warriors under-21s, I believe, to the Panthers under-21s, but he also played a few games in New South Wales Cup. Earlier this year, Compton Purcell went from Warriors under-19s. I think he played one game of under-21s. Then he moved to the Panthers, where he played a few games of under-21s. Then, Kalis Fatialofa was apparently locked in to go to the Panthers. But he decided to stay with the Warriors. So you could say right there, last kind of 12 months, Jet Cleary, Whaiamane, Purcell, and then Fatialofa. That's 4 players that the Panthers could have signed or did sign from the Warriors. Fatialofa decided to stay at the Warriors, so that didn't end up happening. And now we're in a situation where there's a lot of news reports that Toby Crosby is going to join the Panthers. First thing I'll say is that this is the same stuff that was happening with Fatialofa. There were news reports that Fatialofa was going to join the Panthers, then he decided to stay, but now there's news reports that Crosby is going to join the Panthers, maybe Tom Ale as well. My question to you, before I explore this even further, the Panthers, they lost Fisher Harris, they've signed Whaiamane, Purcell from the Warriors in New Zealand. They've signed a young half from the Knights who's from New Zealand in Hami Loza. Whether they get Crosby or not, they've chased Fatialofa, Crosby and Tom Ale as emerging youngish forwards from New Zealand. The Panthers are 4-time champions. The Panthers won those 4 championships with this famed local nursery. We know local nurseries and catchment areas are a complete myth. They don't apply for anything, but it's something that the old school rugby league folks in Australia always talk about, even though they do not exist at all. But so let's say development pipeline. Panthers, fantastic development pipeline. Now they're recruiting even more players from New Zealand into that pipeline. If it's good enough for the Panthers, why isn't it good enough for the Dragons? Because the Dragons, once again,
right.
the Dragons do not have any players recruited from New Zealand. But here we have the best team of this era, 4 championships back to back to back to back, and now they're recruiting even more players, even more juniors from New Zealand. But it's not something the Dragons want to do.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was the angle that was going to be put on the stand to defend the team now. I mean, I think the answer to that question is in what you were saying about the myth of local catchment areas and development, regional, let's get the local lads in. I don't think the Dragons are. They're not the only team, obviously, because it's still a pretty prevailing idea, even though, like, especially in Sydney, like, you're within driving distance of playing for like 6, 8 clubs. So you just go wherever the best opportunity is, and people move around anyway. It's very hard to find it's a little bit of it's not a little, it's a completely reductive idea of that, like just the local juniors type stuff. But it's not a reductive idea to talk about the guys who have been in the system for several years and brought through the system that way, regardless of whether they happen to have been born, within walking distance of the stadium or that type of stuff. The Dragons love that aspect of their club. Like they're one of those teams that lean into that myth the most. And to some, they've had some decent debutants come through in the last year or two who have been players who have been like Dragons juniors all the way through kind of thing. Like they've had some success from that. Personally, my perspective as a New Zealander who supports an Australian team, I think it's kind of crazy if you just are only leaning towards getting your juniors from around there. Why limit yourself? But I think that's why that happens. I think it plays into what you're saying there. Like the Dragons are one of the teams that love that myth of the local catchment area and their own pipelines more than most.
I don't think that's true though, because the Gerringong connection, a lot of those dudes don't play for the Dragons. Like your Ruben Garricks, your Jackson Fords, those dudes who come out of the Dragons. But also Lycan King Tongia, I think he's from Queensland. and Jacob Halangahu's from out near Penrith. So it's more that the catchment area stuff is a myth, but it's instead better to view it as their own pipeline. I think they love their own pipeline a lot.
But you can put New Zealanders in that pipeline, is the thing.
Well, that's literally what every other
teams do.
That's literally what every other NRL team does. Maybe, I just don't know why the Dragons don't do that. But that's their problem, and it's something that the Panthers are not doing. And if you look at this Toby Crosby as a situation is quite fascinating, but I don't want to go too deep into it because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. But like, the best way to view it, like, it's just the weird thing here is that a lot of these players are moving to the Panthers for better opportunities, right? So like Crosby, he probably has a better contract and more opportunity for progress at the Panthers. Compton Purcell wasn't playing much under 21 footy at the Warriors. He played more under 21 footy at the Panthers. Fiamani probably wasn't going, like, he must not have had much of a future at the Warriors, so he went to the Panthers. So that's a very good thing for the Warriors if players are leaving the Warriors to go to the Panthers for better opportunities, which includes the fact that the Panthers want players from the Warriors. Again,
and presumably includes the fact that the Warriors have players that they're keeping instead of those guys, right? Exactly. Like, they're not just giving away their best prospects. Their offload players are good enough to join one of the best systems in the competition, which means that the guys they're keeping must also be pretty handy.
And you only need to look at Fatialofa. Like, the Warriors chose Fatialofa probably over Tom Ale, probably over Toby Crosby, if those moves do come to fruition. And then, like, the one last thing I would say is, like, okay, Toby Crosby was a freaky talent. Well, we got Bishop Neal at the Warriors. There's a freaky talent right there. You got Jason Salalilo, who has played more minutes than Toby Crosby in New South Wales Cup this season. Him and Bishop Neal and Makai Tafua, who can develop into a small forward style of player, thus competing with Toby Crosby for game time. All those dudes have rugby league backgrounds. So if you're Toby Crosby and you're still learning rugby league, a great place for you to go is Penrith Panthers. And I love that move from a Kiwi-NRL perspective for Toby Crosby, because that's going to be a fantastic place for his development. But it's just one of many weird crossover things between the Panthers. And this is another paragraph from my newsletter blurbs. Paya Sikavea, fantastic middle forward, started in under 19s. Now he's a starting middle forward for the under 21s. There's also been a recent development with, Gordon Afoa. He's not recent. He was playing under 21s while still at school at St. Paul's College as a middle forward. His St. Paul's teammate, Albert Belchin, he has moved from the Bulldogs to the Warriors. So he was playing for Bulldogs junior footy early in the year while still at St. Paul's College. He's coming back to the Warriors as a prototypical small forward. So the Warriors have a lot of middle forward depth to absorb the loss of Toby Crosby if that does happen. All of which is pretty damn freaky. Like, Sikavea moves and grooves like an outside back. Gordon Afoa is still at school playing under 21s, and you've got all these small forwards types of players, but you've also got Jason Salalilo playing middle and edge. You've got Kalis Fatialofa playing middle edge centre, right? So all of that stuff, and if we think back to the start of this year, Zion Mai'u was ahead of all the young forwards at the Warriors. The Warriors let him go, and there wasn't a drop-off because Eddie Iramia Toiava was ready. Tanner Stowers Smith was ready, right? Like, Jacob Laban was ready. and they all have a little bit of edge middle versatility. They're all very fast and mobile, and I think it's a similar style decision with Toby Crosby, because the players of the Warriors are prioritizing ahead of Toby Crosby if he does move to the Panthers. Most of them have the ability to cover two positions with rugby league backgrounds, and they are all skillful, fast forwards as well. Back to Warriors versus Panthers. I still don't think, like, my recipe for success here is offloading, dummy half running, halves running. Go back to the idea that, like, I want the Warriors to be a bit funkier. I know that won't happen. How do you assess that from a neutral perspective?
Well, we talked about it last week. So I was like, I noticed it whenever they did an offload on, was it Friday? Friday night? It was Friday, wasn't it? Because it was the Warriors always back-to-back stuff going on. I noticed it when the offloads happened, and I noticed Aaron Clark in particular throwing a couple of those, and I'm thinking, like, that might be the avenue. If someone like that could be, like, if he's the best player on the park, the Warriors could beat the Panthers, certainly. And he might be. Like, he's capable of that. That's not an outlandish thing to hope for, but
he had six offloads versus the Seagulls, so he had a few more than a few.
He had a few and then a few more. Yeah, there you go. Like, that probably needs to be where that starts. Like, if that's going to be the case, but I don't know. I just got through writing about Chatham Cup and Shephard Cup finals, where the theme of it was like the experienced team that knows how to win, and this occasion with a team that won quite comfortably on both occasions. So, like, I might not be in the best head frame to be conceiving of how, even though the Warriors are the higher seeded team and will be the home team, like, we've talked enough over the last few months on why that maybe doesn't really matter in this situation. I don't know. I'd be terrified of playing against the Penrith Panthers at this point, with the sort of the form they've found in the second half of the season, and the players that they still have, even considering the ones who have left. But I don't know. The game I think of the most in terms of the, like, Andrew Webster era and the Warriors doing their Panthers light type stuff, the game I think of the most is the one where they had all their reserves in a year or two ago, and then they actually beat the Panthers. I don't know if that's the only time they've beaten them in that era, but it's certainly the most notable time they've beaten them in that time. So, like, these things do happen, and I don't know. We'll see. But yes, as I think it might require Aaron Clark to be the best player on the field, but I also think he's capable of that.
He's definitely the best player for the Warriors this season. First for post-contact meters, first for offloads, first for tackles, second for a number of runs, third for run meters, third for tackle breaks. And he's run meters, tackle breaks, like, you got Tuivasa-Sheck there. So him and Nickel Clockstar are leading those stats. But, like, you've got one player who is first for post-contact meters, first for offloads, first for tackles. And he 80 minutes versus the Seagulls was the first time he's played 80 minutes this season. So he's top 3 in all those stats, leading 3 of those stats, but he doesn't play 80 minutes. And, like, I don't think Aaron Clark, if he's the best player on the field, the Warriors win for sure, because that means he's better than Nathan Cleary, Dylan Edwards, Isaiah Yeo, Moses Leota, and all those characters. C-Mac, Casey McLean, you five me. If he's the best player on the field, the Warriors win. But, like, and I think that's a little bit unrealistic. But something that is realistic is he's just as influential as Isaiah Yeo. And that would be fascinating, because Isaiah Yeo's awesome, but there is a pathway for Aaron Clark to be just as influential. Like, he does a lot of passing. Against the Eels, he did 15 passes. Against the Sea Eagles, he did 17 passes. The Warriors didn't win those games, but that's just to show that he does most of the passing in the middle of the field. He's also really fast. He also leads the Warriors for offloads, and he's a ruthless bugger. Like, Isaiah Yeo is classier. Isaiah Yeo is silkier. Isaiah Yeo has championship pedigree. But Aaron Clark has the ability to do similar stuff to Isaiah Yeo. And then, to be honest, a lot of how I feel about this game is dependent on team selections on Tuesday night, because I don't think Andrew Webster's going to do anything crazy. But once again, I'm bloody hoping he does. I'm glad you mentioned Panthers light, because you do remind me that the Warriors are the Panthers, the home brand Panthers. And playing like the Panthers is not going to win this game. Just straight up and down. So that is the fascinating situation for the Warriors in this game, is how do they do something different to defeat the Panthers? Because if you're going set with the Panthers, they're going to have the best kick chase, not only in this game, but of the last 3 weeks. Eels, Sea Eagles, now Panthers. And you lost the other 2 games because of good kick chase, because of good defensive effort from the opposition teams. But the Panthers are going to have better kick chase. The Panthers aren't going to be tricked by your little Manatini Okore back in the middle. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck bouncing back into the middle. The Panthers are going to be working hard on those inside shoulders. Dylan Edwards is going to be scrambling every direction. And just doing stuff like the Panthers isn't going to work. That's why Sam Healy's got to be in the team. Because the way he runs, he bounces every direction out of dummy half. So then you're actually working over the defense around the ruck. Wade Egan does get out of dummy half, but he doesn't have like a sidestep. He doesn't have a burst of speed. He does his slow motion activity, which could be useful when packaged alongside Sam Healy. But if you're just going Wade Egan to Maire Martin out of dummy half, Panthers are eating that up. Because the thing that I've noticed, if the Warriors don't have a dummy half threat, which I've talked all season about Wade Egan running from dummy half. He's got like career high run meters per game. He is one of the most active runners out of dummy half. But again, it's slow motion. It's meticulous. It's crafty. I wouldn't describe Wade Egan's dummy half running as a threat. It's not threatening. It's something different. I don't know exactly that. But then, as I've observed, the Warriors forwards and their runners are just running into 4 dudes because that defense is moving off other potential runners and they're just loading up on the guy they predict will get the ball. So if the defense can predict who's going to get the ball, well, you've got no deception there, do you? Because they're predicting who's going to get the ball, and then they're smashing you. But if you got a threat out of dummy half, if you got a good decoy runner, if you got viable options inside and outside, then those 3 defenders becomes like 2.5, and there's more space between them. That's when you get your footwork and stuff like that going, all of which starts with the gap theory, targeting the gap behind the ruck. If you don't do that, the Panthers are just going to smash you. They're going to load up on you. They're going to fold you up, and you're going to lose the ruck. But if you can attack that hole behind the ruck, then at least you're engaging a few of those defenders so they can't move out. They got to stay in front of that ruck area. Other than that, like if you're trying to play rugby league like the Panthers, you're going to lose this game. And as is the theme of the podcast, I have a hope, I have a dream dreams happen when you're asleep. How about that? Crikey, Jack. I have a dream, but dreams only happening when you're sleeping. And I don't think the Warriors are sleeping. I think we're dealing in the reality of Warriors Rugby League in 2025, given their personnel, given everything we've seen this year. I think they're going to try play like the Panthers, and they're probably going to lose. I will be fascinated as well to see the involvement of the young forwards in this game. First of all, who is selected? Because Jackson Ford might come back into the team. Then you might lose one of your young forwards, Aotearoa, Tanistawa Smith. But then what's happening with like just so first of all, selections, then game time, how many minutes they're playing, and then what they're doing. Can they impact winning rugby league for the Warriors? All 5 of my young forwards, so Jacob Laban won't be playing against the Panthers, he's out injured. But Dimitri Vaimonga, Halasima, Laban, Stowers Smith, Aotearoa Toiava, 5 forwards, all 21 years or younger, and they all averaged over 30 minutes per game this season. Laban won't play against the Panthers. There's a chance that the other 4 do, and there's a chance they all play over 30 minutes, or maybe more conservatively over 25 minutes. What are they doing in this game against Moses Leota, Scott Sorensen, Liam Martin, Isaiah Yeo, Lindsay Smith, and those other young forwards like Liam Henry, those type of characters, Isaiah Papali'i, maybe Ludon Patea. Fascinating matchup. Just quickly, some other finals stuff, players I want to highlight in this first round of NRL finals footy. We've talked about C-Mac for the Panthers, but what about A-Mac for the Melbourne Storm? Alec MacDonald, been talking a lot about him all season. Him and Joe Chan are going to be very interesting. I think they talked about them all season. They have Kiwis upside, and I'm going to be curious because they're both smaller forwards. Joe Chan usually plays on an edge, but he can play as a small forward in the middle. Alec MacDonald is a small forward. They're playing against the Bulldogs, who are the fast small forward team. Like, that is the style of player they have recruited. Alec MacDonald may be he might shine in this game against, like, his peers are NRL players, but his peers in terms of the style of rugby league player that he is. So I'm curious about that. I'm curious about the Roosters youngsters, Benaiah Ioelu and Salisi Faketi, both from South Auckland. Ioelu's from Aotearoa, probably going to play for Samoa. Faketi is a Manirewa junior who's probably going to play for Tonga. What's their involvement in their finals game against the Cronulla Sharks? Then we go Raiders versus Broncos. Broncos, I'm all about Jordan Riki, who I think has had his best season of NRL footy, and he is going to be on that edge for the Broncos. Then the Raiders, talked about them last week. A lot of Kiwi-NRL juniors in their team, but specifically I'm most interested in Matthew Timoko and Joseph Tapine and what they're going to do in finals footy with a bit of pressure. Because as we've seen with maybe Auckland FC, if you win that minor premiership, you got to go deep into the finals. It's cool that you won a minor premiership, but if you don't make the grand final, at least, it's not so cool. Like, no one's thinking back to last season and be like, yeah, big up Auckland FC, minor premiers. No, we think back to last season, we think, oh, Auckland FC were part of the Mount Smart curse and they lost and then it sucked and wah.
Yeah, lost in the semis. Was that ball out or was it not out? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, didn't do it, you know? And that is the prevailing memory.
The Raiders have won the minor premiership, and they did so with excellent stuff from their players from New Zealand. and players not from New Zealand, like Sebastian Kris, who was chosen to represent New Zealand. Simi Sasangi going to play for Samoa. Ata Mariota playing for Samoa. And then you've got your Matthew Timoko and Joseph Tapine, who, like Matthew Timoko, fantastic centre. Joseph Tapine, my best player from New Zealand this season. Like, they are top tier New Zealand Kiwis. Timoko is my starting centre. He is my premier centre. Then you got Casey McLean and Sebastian Kris. Joseph Tapine is my premier New Zealand Kiwis player overall. Top tier, top notch, number one. Numero tahi. But he's also that for your middle forwards. Then you got your Fisher Harrises and your Leotas, Papali'is and so on. What are they doing in finals footy now that the pressure is on the Canberra Raiders? Let's swing back to the All Whites. And we do have All Whites playing tonight against Australia. As described in our newsletter Monday, you thought that Ryan Thomas was the best player for the All Whites. So now we've got this timeline. We won't go too deep into All Whites because they are playing tonight, so it is a bit tricky to talk in depth about them. But we do have this timeline of Ryan Thomas. You're celebrating Ryan Thomas's selection in the squad, and then I'm like, whoa, is Ryan Thomas really that good? And we went back and forth. And then Ryan Thomas is the best player in the first game against Australia. So what did you see from Ryan Thomas that made him the standout player for the All Whites, as like a bit more of a scouting report on what Ryan Thomas does for New Zealand and what makes him so good at football? Because based on everything you've said over the last few weeks, based on what happened in the first game against Australia, Ryan Thomas is up there with I think Chris Wood's the Joseph Tapine. Like, he's up there by himself. But then you got like your Stameniches, your Joe Bells, your Tyler Bindens. There's like that second tier for the Kiwis. Your second tier for the All Whites is really good as well. And Ryan Thomas is very much at least at the top of the second tier, pushing into the category of just like one of the best players from New Zealand right now. What is it about his performance against Australia? Like, how does all that apply to his performance against Australia from what you saw?
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting because, like, I mean, people have known that Ryan Thomas is a heck of a talent going back. Like, he debuted for the All Whites. He was still a teenager. He's been playing professionally in Holland since, more than a decade at this point. He now captains Pix Willett. He's not, but he kind of is now. Like, he's been doing some media stuff because he's one of the guys who's, him coming back after 6 years. It's a big deal, right? So he's been doing some media stuff, and one of the things he's talking about is how, like, he's married to a Dutch woman. He's lived in Netherlands for more than a decade. His kids speak Dutch, so he speaks Dutch at home. Like, he does post game interviews and stuff like that. Like, he does his media in Dutch, and so he said, like, kind of because he hasn't been playing All Whites for quite a few years. It's kind of like the only time he speaks English is when he's on the phone to his parents. That's the only time he speaks English. So now he even speaks English with a Dutch accent. Like, you can hear it a little bit in some of his interviews. You can hear he's got that kind of it's not really a twang. the Dutch, I wouldn't call it that, but he has that that kind of Dutch, the Dutch touch to his like, just to how he speaks, even when he's speaking in English. But no, there's no Dutch heritage up until he moved there. So he's not like more than claimed. It's a developed thing.
He's not
it's not like one of those Stamenic playing in Serbia or Cacace playing in Italy type situations,
or like a Logan Van Beek
neither of them are there anymore,
playing for Netherlands.
No, not even that type of situation. But yeah, as far as how he Well, actually, no, like, yeah, we'll blend those two ideas together because it was one of the things that has been said both by him and by other guys around the squad is just how easily he fitted in, like as a personality. And I think that's part of the Always in general. Like that is a very welcoming group with a like great chemistry, great camaraderie. We've talked a lot about how they just like the best players turn up tour after tour after tour because they all want to be there. There's competition for places, but there's also just like there's friendship between those guys. They're part of something and they want to be there. If the team is playing, they'll feel left out if they're not there. Um, so like the way that he like all the stories leading up to that game were just how well he's just like picked up where he left off 6 years ago, even though at least 2/3 of the squad probably weren't even playing when he last played for the Always. Um, and then we saw that on the pitch. Like he wasn't expected to start. Michael Stamanic got injured, so then it becomes a thing of like, well, you were going to play maybe 30 minutes off the bench, but now we might need you to start. And Thomas is like, yeah, good to go, mate. I'll do what I can. Plays an hour, was superb. Like just silky midfield stuff. He's probably the best of our midfielders in possession, like just controlling the ball, pressure's on, make the right decision. Great touch, swiveling into space, just using the, you know, getting getting that early picture of what the situation is around him and using that to like, where is the space? How can I get the ball there? And then doing that, which worked extremely well in a game like that first one against Australia, where actually for the first half, the All Whites really quite dominated. Like they're not just dominated and they were creating chances and better chances, but really kept the ball and were like set up in the Aussie half for a lot of it and just playing really nice football, which I think Ryan Thomas has a lot to do with. Like, bringing him in there, as I say, probably the best position-based midfielder that the All Whites have in this group. I also think they missed Marko Stamanic a lot, as just having that extra bit of punch in there and maybe a bit more size, even just from set pieces, having another tall fella to be able to aim for against a very big Australian backline who played very well and repelled a lot of the. It was like back to the wall stuff, but they did manage to repel a lot of that to keep their team level up until they could snatch the victory right at the very end. But it goes to show how much it's not just that Ryan Thompson is coming in as an excellent player, like a fantastic addition. Don't even really know how you fit these guys all into a starting midfield, but as we saw on the weekend, on the Friday night game, where substitutions was such a big deal, where Australia made a bunch of subs and they made their team a lot better, where we made subs and they involved having to take off Ryan Thomas to protect him because he hasn't played for ages for this team, to take off Chris Wood after an hour to make sure he's fresh for the next game. And it's like, if Marko Stamanic was there to bring on for the last 30 minutes, maybe they hang on for a 0-0 draw in that one. But he wasn't, and that's where the lack of depth, not lack of depth, but just the depth got tested there. We've got depth to the levels now where we could lose Cacace, we could lose Stamanic, Garbutt wasn't there, etc., etc. One or two others, like those guys aren't around, all right. Ryan Thomas comes into the midfield. I sweet as, no dramas there, until you have to sub Ryan Thomas off and you've got to like a bench full of A-League players who are good job doers, but it is obviously there is a drop off between Chris Wood and Costa Barbarouses, or else, you know, and then Darren Bates even said afterwards, it was an interesting quote from him, like he said he would never substitute Chris Wood for tactical reasons. Like there's no situation in which there's a player who would be better than Chris Wood in any capacity. Whenever he's subbed off, it is a concession to fitness or protecting him or his club or things like that. Put a pin in that idea because I'll come back around to his club in a sec when we finish with Brian Thomas. But he offers something different. He's a different type of midfielder, and I think trying to get the All Whites to that next level might well involve being able to dominate the ball a lot more as well in certain matchups. Like there's games where that's just completely unrealistic. You're not going to go to Spain and keep more than 35% possession or something. You know, there you probably do need just like big physical bodies, guys who can do the job that Joe Bell does, guys who can do the job that Marko Stamanic does, even Alex Rufer. Like, it would be really important in that type of situation. But if you're against a team where you think you can score a few goals and and knock the ball around and really like apply pressure through more sustained build-ups, Ryan Thomas becomes an incredibly important player to have as an option in that one. So it's nice to be able to see like, whereas perhaps like I don't know, because there's also someone like Matt Garbutt could play there, who's a bit more of a, you want him in a more dynamic role where it's counter-attacking and stuff like that, or you just chuck him out on the wing and do what you do that way. They've got nice options here, and Thomas complements that by adding just another layer to what the All Whites are capable of doing in their midfield.
Tyler Boyd, who, oh, sorry, destroyed my little tease there. Ryan Thomas, who is born in Te Puke, but kind of comes from Tauranga, and he came up through local footy with Tyler Boyd.
Mm-hmm.
Very different careers since then.
But they do have a lot of injuries in common. That is one thing.
Right, so they got injuries in common, but like Tyler Boyd has played for twice as many teams as Ryan Thomas. And
more than that, I think probably.
Yeah.
I think
right.
Thomas has basically played for two clubs. He went to Pek Zwolle, then he got a transfer to PSV Eindhoven.
Yep.
Then he got injured and went back to Pek Zwolle.
Yeah, so he's played for two. Tyler Boyd's played for like maybe 10. So
he's played in more countries than Thingy has clubs. So
5 times as many. Ryan Thomas back in the All Whites. Tyler Boyd infamously chose to represent Trumpland over Aotearoa, and as I've been tracking throughout our podcast tenure, not much doing for Tyler Boyd these days.
He did his ACL last year, so I think he is just coming back from that now. I haven't checked to see if he played on the weekend. He's made a bench since then. It's a race between him and Ellie Riley to see who actually gets to, like, they both made their comebacks from long-term injuries, but neither of them are actually, like, they're just getting on the bench but not getting subbed on so far. So it's like that last step in the comeback.
Because Tyler Boyd did leave LA to go to Nashville. He played 20 games in Nashville, but he hasn't played any football 2025, as you said, due to injuries. So, yeah, it's just a weird crossover. Like, they came from the same place, probably had similar footballing potential, like considering what they were doing as youngsters. One has taken the American route as far as playing for America and playing for every other football team he can. And the other has taken the Kiwi route. You know, he's just sticking solid with his crew in Netherlands, and representing Aotearoa is the pinnacle for him. You mentioned Chris Wood and some of his team stuff.
Yeah.
What's the latest
there? This was breaking news while we've been recording. Remember the dramas with Coach Nuno and his owner, and his falling out with the transfer guru that they brought in, Mr. Edu. Remember all that stuff?
I'm a bit worried.
Yeah, well, guess who lost the battle?
Edu.
Nope. Laterbo Nuno. So he's done. Chris Wood scored 33 goals in 55 Premier League games under the coaching of Nuno Espirito Santo, but he's been sacked. While Chris Wood was out of the country, I think that must have been what they were waiting for, is get Woodsy away so that he doesn't have his bodyguard anymore. On the night of a All Whites game too. A nasty time to announce that. Like, just if we find out that, because one of the only one that I've seen is like a legitimate candidate that's been rumored to take over back like a week or two ago when they were talking about that first. And then they said, like, no, we had some meetings and everything's been cleared out, blah, blah, blah. And then the international window comes around and they've sacked him. So obviously either they're lying about the meetings or something else has happened since. Sounds like a lot of big personalities in that room, so wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But one of the guys that was mentioned was another big personality, Ange Postecoglou. So if they've sacked Nuno Espirito Santo, Chris Wood's best mate, on the morning of an All Whites game against Australia to hire an Australian to replace him, I'm thinking shenanigans there.
I think I described this feeling last time as well when we were talking about the dramas at Nottingham Forest, because I want the best for Nottingham Forest with Chris Wood involved. Obviously, Tyler Binden's part of the organisation as well. thankfully Marko Stamenic got out of there. He's now just fully on with Swansea. It seems very strange that you would have a coach who takes you to, I don't know the history of Nottingham Forest, but like in my lifetime, Nottingham Forest has not been a factor at all.
They were once upon a time. They've like won European Cups in the 80s with like Brian Clough era and whatever. So they've been a team that's been one of the best in Europe, complete non-factor for like 20, 30 years, and are now back in Europe for the first time in ages and promptly sacked their coach for non-footballing reasons.
They sacked their coach today, now. But before that, they brought in someone to do things differently as far as the player. Like they brought in someone to antagonize the coach, which seems insane.
Probably not deliberately to antagonize him, but it's like, you know, that's the effect that it's had.
Yeah,
like you're changing, you're shuffling the deck here. You're changing the dynamic of that club when the coach has just signed a big new contract and everyone loves him because he's been so successful. It's like, this is going great. Let's change it. There's no need.
Yeah, so I don't know. We'll wait and see. I'm a Chris Wood supporter. I'm not a Nottingham Forest supporter, so it's all good.
Well, how about this? How about this for a scenario? Chris Wood plays out the season with whoever the new manager is. He plays some Europa League, scores a bunch of goals, gets to his 100 Premier League goal milestone and all this. Nuno Espirito Santo has a bit of time away from the game, as they always do. Pops back up maybe late in the season when some team is, I don't know, West Ham or I was going to say Everton, but they actually look all right at the moment. You know, one of those types of teams, battling relegation, sack their coach, they new one. Nuno steps in, then he signs Chris Wood next season. When Chris Wood will be in the last year of his contract, because he signed a 2-year extension last year. They only wanted to give him a 1-year extension. He negotiated his way into a 2-year extension by just scoring so many goals they couldn't deny him, which worked out beautifully. One of those like bet on yourself moments. Like, I'm not going to sign that yet. I'm just going to go and score another hat trick and then we'll talk. So he does that. But if they wanted to sell him for a fee while he's at his peak and he'd be like 34 by that point, I think that's a doable type of thing where they've already signed a few other strikers younger than him who they probably are thinking of as being like the guys moving forward. We might need to send the rescue crew in for Tyler Bindon if things get ugly, because we don't know exactly what will go down there in the future. But Chris Wood might just go play for Nuno Espirito Santo somewhere else, you know, and can pick up where he left off.
It's got a few games for Aotearoa to play first and foremost. Including a World Cup. I wouldn't be surprised because I think that Nottingham Forest owner, he's a bit of a volatile cat, right?
There's some stories.
Yeah.
There's some stories you'd probably be interested in too, but they're not really like, don't want to broadcast that stuff. You know, rumored connections and things like that. I'll put it this way. He uses a non-smartphone. Well, there are no non-smartphones yet, but he's not exactly buying like the flashiest iPhone. He's out there with like an iPhone 4 or something like that. When you're a billionaire, it's like, maybe that's a burner.
Wait, you're making him sound cool.
I'm saying maybe this is his non-work, his no-show job.
Yeah, right. Okay.
This is his like deck chairs at Nottingham Forest City Ground. Yeah.
Righto. Some other,
me, Mr. Marinakis.
Some other.
All we need to do is get the Greeks from Wellington Olympic to go sort him out.
Would they be the same Greeks from The Wire?
I think Marinakis is the Greeks from The Wire, but yeah, that might not be safe. I'm not sure.
Other football. I didn't know Mariana Speckmaier from one season with Wellington Phoenix.
Yeah.
Fame.
Yep.
She is now playing with Michaela Foster and Hannah Blake for Durham in England. So shout out to Speckmaier, but we're all about the Kiwis here. Mickey Foster and Hannah Blake combined to set up Speckmaier for a goal. Break down the Kiwi connection for Durham. And also Katie Kitching Football Ferns scored a goal for Sunderland last week as well. So a few Kiwi ladies playing in England, where we've also got all the lads playing in Championship and the lower grades in England, but we've also got a few Football Ferns players involved in England as well.
Yeah, the sad thing about that is for the first time in ages, like many years, we don't actually have a New Zealander in the top flight of women's football in England this season. However, like the ladies were already leading that charge of getting all these Kiwis into the second tiers. Like we've seen this with the blokes in the championship recently. Cacache, Bindon, Crocombe, and Starmanich is the other one. So those four guys all signing the championship. Well, we already had more than four last year playing in the women's equivalent of that division, and it's the same thing this year. And it was a little bit of excellent and a little bit of terrible for the first round of that for that competition. So Grace Neville playing for Ipswich, who are a promoted team. She was playing for London City Lionesses last year when they got promoted from this division as champions, and then they let her go rudely. She signed with Ipswich Town. They lost 4-0 in the first round. She did play 90 minutes though, so that's all right. And they are a team with quite a few new signings, so they'll probably might take a little while to settle in. But she does have a solid job there at right back. Indy Riley playing for Crystal Palace is the other bummer one, where she was stuck on the bench watching as they lost 1-0 to Charlton, which is a little bit surprising. I think their formation doesn't really play with wingers, only wing backs, which is all right because I think she's probably going to be a wing back for the Football Ferns the way that they've been lining up under Michael Main. But she didn't, Gucci Main, but she didn't play this weekend. She was on the bench watching while a new signing played that right wing back instead of her. So hopefully that dynamic changes sooner. But the other two scenarios that you mentioned were spectacular. 4-0 win for Sunderland against Sheffield United. Katie Kitchen was pretty good in there, but there were a lot of good players. So it's not like she stood out like she often does for them. She is a really key playmaker coming off the best season of her career last season. But she did still find time to score a ripper of a goal herself within that 4-0 victory. And then, yes, Durham won 2-0 away against Portsmouth with the big Phoenix connection there. Hannah Blake never played for the Phoenix. She probably, she could have. She's good enough. She played for a couple other A-League teams. The Phoenix just didn't sign her. But she set up a goal for Mariana Speckmeier. Mickey Foster played as a centre-back. And thought that was quite an interesting one as well, but she played really well there. Like they kept a clean sheet, and there were a lot of instances, like both goals, for example, came from her getting the ball at the back, pushing it forward, either dribbling forward or putting like one of her, excellent technical long passes, flinging that thing up there and creating something that way. Still taking corners, even as a centre back. You don't often get centre backs taking corners, but there you go. And yeah, had a really strong game in that position where she's almost like a quarterback, like a deep lying playmaker. Just pick the ball up and bit of scramble here and there, bit of long bombs, bit of Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball deep, or Jalen Hurts scrambling for a first down, that kind of stuff. Mickey Foster. So that stuff that was all awesome. And Speckmeier, Blake, Foster all started in that game. Don't know if we get to count Speckmeier as an honourable New Zealander, but there is an interesting angle to that because, of course, she was a Phoenix teammate of Mickey Foster. So was Riley Foster, who was their original import goalkeeper 2 years ago. She played for Durham last year too. So she's left, and they've signed another ex-Phoenix import to come in and play for this team instead. And guess who was in the crowd as well for that game was Nellie Lawrence, who used to coach the Wellington Phoenix for one season, assistant for one season, head coach for another season. She's been back in England for a couple of years, but she was at that game. So there's some photos on the Durham website with her and Mickey Foster, who she signed to her first professional contract that season with the Wellington Phoenix. So all that stuff was, very cool. It was obviously an international break, so not a lot of action from the fellas this round, but the ladies more than made up for that. The kitchen goal, the Blake assist. Gabby Rennie had an assist as her team went top of the Swedish second tier. Jacqui Hands scored a goal as well, a really nice goal, even though her team ultimately, I think they came from 3-1 down to get back to 3-3. She scored the equalising goal, then they conceded again and lost 4-3. So they're still heading towards relegation as it stands, but they have a couple of potentially more winnable. Like this was a game they were expected to lose by a lot more than they did. So they've got a couple more winnable games coming up. good stuff there. So Herring debuted for her new Bundesliga team, top flight of Germany, got 20 minutes off the bench. My Hahn's been playing good in the second tier, starting games for Victoria Berlin. Mentioned Wisniewski and Bowen playing in Champions League stuff last week. Grace Wisniewski continued that with a start playing, I think she might even play 90 minutes for Nord-Jylland back in the Danish league this week. So plenty of good stuff going on there.
I'd continue that because Devon Jackson, she's left Newcastle in the A-League to join Melbourne City, who are the big Donnies in the A-League. Couple of championships for Melbourne City with, what's her name?
Rebecca Stott as captain, yes.
Rebecca Stott
the drone enthusiast.
The drone enthusiast. So that's a great move for Devon Jackson. That's like impressing move, yes. At a kind of lower tier club, respect to Newcastle. But then you get scouted and recruited by the big Donnies of the A-League. Then there's the Macey Fraser situation. So she... Like, all these moves to America just seem shit. And it's like,
they honestly do.
They are, local media in New Zealand, it's like, oh, this young player, I feel like those moves to America, whether it's Millie Clegg, Macey Fraser, those type of characters, they are covered a lot more than the Kiwis going to England and going to, different corners of Europe and... on the men's side, Cambodia and South Africa. But as we just alluded to, nothing good seems to happen for the Kiwi footballers in America. But we'll keep the positive tinge and the positive tone. Whatever situation Macey Fraser was in, she's no longer in that situation anymore. So she might stay in America, but she was... basically not playing. She was just doing podcasts for her MLS team, or I'm getting all my terms mixed up. She was just...
NWSL, yeah.
NWSL. She wasn't playing. The coach clearly didn't really give a shit about her. And now she leaves. Do you have any kind of... Like, who cares about what's happened there? Because... America just seems like a bit of a graveyard, full stop, let alone for Kiwi footballers, unless you're Michael Boxall and Finn Sermon. What do you think is next for Macey Fraser?
Yeah, I was going to say it's more for the women's footballers who get graveyarded in America, but then I'm thinking, well, Bill Tuoloma didn't have a very nice time of it for like 18 months, so...
Tyler Boyd?
Tyler Boyd went there, did all right for LA Galaxy, and they didn't re-sign him, and then he does his ACL at Nashville. So, and also he probably moved back to MLS to get into the American team, which has not happened. So he hasn't got back into the American team. He was playing with them while he was in Turkey, and now he's playing in America, and they didn't want to pick him. Well, he's injured at the moment. Yeah, Finn Sermon's really an exception to the rule there, but it's been especially egregious on the women's side. Like Grace Wisniewski couldn't get a game in the second tier competition for most of last season. Now she's starting for a Champions League qualifier. You can't tell me that team is worse than the one she was playing for last year, and yet now she's been that much more respected. And that's the thing about these situations. It's like Katie Bowen spent a year stuck on one of our best players spent a year stuck on the bench at North Carolina, admittedly because they wanted her to be a centre-back and Abby Erceg was the centre-back. So at least there was a Kiwi keeping her out of the team. But she goes and plays for, Melbourne City for 1 year and then into Milan. Grace Wisniewski bouncing back. A lot of these players like, Daisy Cleverly or Jacqui Hand or Gabby Rennie, Hannah Blake is another one who come out of college there. Some of them play well in college. Some of them don't even get the opportunities in college that they should get. But none of them get drafted or signed professionally in America. What they do is then they go to professional clubs in the A-League or Europe and get situations way beyond what it seems like they should. So the pattern is that the players who get disrespected, disregarded in America bounce back really well at their next opportunities. I don't know where that'll be for Macey Fraser. I have a sneaking suspicion because she's managed to get a full release. Like this isn't, we're going to loan you out and bring you back next year or whatever. I think she had another year on her contract. So this is a full release, which means no transfer fees have to be involved, which means she can just go wherever she wants. I have a feeling that's cleared the way for a return to the Wellington Phoenix, which would be probably a good situation, bit of a reset, natural confines, happy environment. But we'll see. The pattern is that they always get a lot better wherever they go next. Like these players, it's not nice, but where they were, but they do bounce back.
It's not nice being in America.
No.
Let's finish with a bit of cricket. We're waiting on the White Ferns World Cup squad. We're waiting for some Blackcaps T20 stuff to drop ahead of their T20 series versus Australia. But I want to offer my 5x5 groups, and we'll explore some Kiwi cricket from there. I started with just like listing my groups, and then I realized that I can have 5 groups with 5 cricketers in each group and not repeat any of the cricketers. So that means we've got 25 cricketers across these groups, which, I mean, we talk about like 35 to 40 players in the wider Blackcaps pipeline and how awesome that is for Kiwi cricket. Being able to offer 5 different groups of Kiwi cricketers and not repeat any names and have 25 players across all tiers, like the seaming all-rounders. No one in that group has played higher than New Zealand A. Right, and then you've got my T20 seam, my T20 batting lineup. So it's across all levels of the Blackcaps pipeline, and we've got 25 players who have been listed. The emerging batters group we've already discussed. Abbas, Bevan Jacobs, Reece Madu, Dale Phillips, Curtis Heafy. T20 seam bowlers. This is very interesting ahead of the T20 World Cup. And I alluded to this around the Will O'Rourke injury information a few weeks ago. Matt Henry, Jacob Duffy, Lockie Ferguson, Adam Milne, Zach Fox. That is my T25 for Blackcaps seam bowling. Do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I think that's spot on. Is that like ordered as well?
Yes. Henry, Duffy, Ferguson,
Milne. It sounds like it is, but also you probably did that on purpose, which is why it sounds that way.
Milne, Ferguson, Milne, Fox. No Will O'Rourke in that group, and no Kyle Jamieson in that group. No Ben Sears either. So if I was going to keep doing my groups, for some reason, I just wanted to keep to the 5x5. But that's the depth we're talking about here, where there's no Ben Sears, there's no Will O'Rourke, there's no Kyle Jamieson, who are probably the funkiest of those seamers. Sears could be in the T20 mix for Australia and the World Cup, depending on maybe Milne, Ferguson, and Fox, what's happening there. Jamieson, he needs to do something in T20 cricket to earn selection in T20 World Cup squad, and Will O'Rourke is out injured, so he probably don't have to worry about that. T20 batters. Tim Seifert, Devon Conway, Rachin Ravindra, Daryl Mitchell, Mark Chapman. And this is very interesting because, well, Finn Allen isn't interesting, but he would be in this group if he was available. But I think he's been out injured recently. So he's got to do something he's just got to score some T20 runs. But then this gets into a wider conversation about Kane Williamson. Because I think Finn Allen is more deserving of a T20 spot than Kane Williamson. Because what does Finn Allen do? Opens the batting, smashes the ball. I also like Glenn Phillips could be in this group, but he's out injured, and so I just went with this 5. Seifert, Conway, Ravindra, Mitchell, Chapman, which I think is a very good 5, but the conversation point here to me is Kane Williamson. And we've been discussing Kane Williamson, the T20 batter, for a long time. I don't think he's a T20 first 11 player. And given that 5, then you add in Finn Allen, then you add in Glenn Phillips. I don't have a spot for Kane Williamson in my T20 World Cup squad. The key thing will be whether Kane Williamson is selected for the series against Australia coming up.
Yeah, that will be the key because he almost never plays T20s. It's like, and you just it's not like even it's not even a situation like Trent Bolt coming in for a couple of tournaments in recent years where it's like you're not playing anything outside that already feels like a big concession. But at least like if he's playing a T20 World Cup, well, he has been playing a lot of T20 cricket in preparation. He's kind of only been playing T20 cricket in preparation for those, although they did do that with the ODI World Cup as well, with him. It's not even that though, because Kane Williamson doesn't. He does play a bit of that, but I wouldn't say he excels at it, and I wouldn't say he like keeps his full calendar of just specifically doing that stuff in the way that Bolt had been. So I don't even know if he's particularly that tuned up for it. But it's yeah. I mean, if you don't play through the whole cycle, like if you continually skip out on tours, which I don't think anyone is upset about. I think everyone understands why he does that, why he doesn't play a lot of the home series or it's not even home or away. He just doesn't play much T20 cricket outside of tournament stuff. No one's upset about that, but at the same time, he can't be upset if he doesn't get picked for a tournament, having not been part of any of the preparation for most of it. So if he does play against Australia, that shows that, like with the T20 World Cup on the horizon, that shows that he's keen and he's ready to be involved in that, and he's doing what he can to be involved in it. But if he doesn't, don't actually see how you can pick him. And it's not even about whether he is one of the best 11 T20 players, or best 15 even, T20 players in the country, which is itself a separate debate we could have. I mean, I don't even think it gets to that level, though. It's like if you don't make yourself available through the preparation stuff. And I can't remember what that stat was that I had about it, but it was, he played like 8 of the last 50 games or something like that. That's just not a player you pick for your squad. And until similar to what you're saying about Jamison coming back from injury or things like that, like until you do something to change that narrative, and playing in the Aussie series could be that potential. But then we do get into that conversation of, okay, but is he the best option to bat at 3 in a T20 World Cup? And that's another debate. That's a whole other argument we could have as well.
Two things from there. I think Rachin Ravindra is a better T20 batter right now, and I think Rachin Ravindra's development into a really good T20 batter has coincided with Kane Williamson dropping away. And also, I think Trent Bolt is more likely to be selected in a T20 World Cup squad than Kane Williamson. Because that's just a end product of everything you just said. Because Trent Bolt plays T20 cricket around the world at a pretty high level, and he's just a better T20 cricketer to me right now than Kane Williamson. And it's up to both of them whether they want to. It's not whether they want to be involved, it's whether they want to be available to make their case. Because it's not like they're just automatics. Kane Williamson's not being selected ahead of Rachin Ravindra, Daryl Mitchell, and these other batters. Sounds
those
crazy.
Other guys are scoring runs. Those other guys are taking wickets. You can't just jump the queue.
They score runs quickly, and it's insane. Trent Bolt, he's a lot better than Jacob Duffy. But Jacob Duffy takes a lot of wickets for New Zealand in T20 cricket, right? Like Lockie Ferguson is doing that. Matt Henry's doing that. So that's just where we're at with those guys. Emerging batters, we talked about that. Spinners, pure spinners. Mitchell Santner, Ish Sodhi, Aditya Ashok, Jaden Lennox, Tim Pringle. So we're not talking Glenn Phillips. We're not talking Michael Bracewell. To me, Santner's a pure spinner because he's a world-class spinner who can bat a bit. Sodhi and Ashok, pretty similar there. I don't think that top 3 is crazy. Then we go Jaden Lennox, who's played in both New Zealand A series this year, and then Tim Pringle, who I still think has a future with the Blackcaps, but I believe he's still playing with Netherlands as recently as now.
That's pretty recent.
It's pretty recent. I think he's playing in their current setup. I'll just confirm that. Yes, T20 internationals versus Bangladesh early in September. He's playing. And he's played a bunch of different games for Netherlands. No, that's all for the current window. But he is contracted to Northern District, so I think he's still in that wider Blackcaps mix. But it does get interesting, like Tim Pringle could have been an interesting player for New Zealand A. The New Zealand Puro New Zealand style within me is like, okay, but we can have Jaden Lennox playing for New Zealand A and Tim Pringle playing for Netherlands, and they're both playing cricket at a pretty high level in service of New Zealand cricket development. All right, that's a ridiculous thing to say with regards to Netherlands cricket, because it's kind of like Netherlands is doing the development work for Tim Pringle to play for the Blackcaps. And Tim Pringle didn't play any domestic cricket last season, I don't believe. I think he was injured. So I'm jumping the gun with Tim Pringle, but I want to keep throwing his name out there as a left-arm finger spinner who is already playing international cricket. He's already played 22 T20s for Netherlands, and he's averaging 25. And he's got a T20 bowling average of 23.8. He's over 40 in ODIs, first class and list A. He's actually averaging 221 in his 4 innings of ODI bowling for Netherlands. So he is quite similar to Lennox, because Lennox, his best work comes in T20 cricket, but he's found a groove for CD in the Plunket Shield, and he's bowling as a spinner for New Zealand A in their first class games in Bangladesh and now South Africa. So there is uncertainty around what Tim Pringle is going to do in the future, but I think he is a spinner who has like potential to play for the Blackcaps. But Aditya Ashok is still the premier young spinner in Aotearoa, and Lennox he's been a consistent member of the New Zealand A team this year. So they're there. But then you've got the Phillips, the Bracewells, the Rachin Ravindras as well. And because my young seam all-rounder group does not have Zach Folks or Nathan Smith, I have also been pondering but this idea that I could have a cricket team to represent New Zealand with Rachin Ravindra, Glenn Phillips, Zach Folks, and Nathan Smith. I think in the future, all 4 of those dudes could bat in the top 6. All right, I'll chill out a bit and I'll say top 7.
You could get there now with, if you said top 8, I think you could make that happen.
Yeah, but that's too tame.
I mean, Phillips and Ravindra can already bat wherever they want, so that half of that is solved. It's just a matter of
I think it's
Folks'
like a
development.
So like this summer, you could have, depending on the format, you could have those 4 in your top 8. Next summer, you could have those 4 in your top 7. The next summer, you could have those 4 in your top 6, and then maybe in a few years' time, you could have those 4 in your top 5. No, that's too crazy. But like, maybe. But the point here...
Well, I mean, 3 of them would have to be top 5 if they're in your top 6, because only one of them can bat 6, so close enough.
In that situation, I'm going Zach Folks 5, Nathan Smith 6.
Yeah.
And then maybe Zach Folks, he just becomes really, 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 really good at batting, so he's your number 4. And then Nathan Smith scoring centuries out the wazoo as well, so he gets selected number 5. But this isn't
Zach Folks has opened.
But he didn't
shield.
score. He didn't. I can't.
Yeah, sure, he didn't score runs. Yeah. That's Simon Keane's job, eh?
That is Simon Keane's job. Okay, but though I think there is a situation where those four are in the same team together. Okay, they're not all in your top six, but you've got Phillips and Ravindra who are in your top five. Definitely your top six if Phillips is batting six or whatever. But they both bowl spin. Then you got Smith and Foulkes, who could both average over 20 in Test cricket, but they're there for their bowling. Right? You see what I'm building here? You got two of your best batters can bowl handy overs a spin, and then two of your best seamers can score handy runs. And if you have those four dudes in your same cricket team, well, like, so say you got Zach Foulkes number 7, Nathan Smith number 8, you got space for 3 more bowlers below them. 3 seamers, because you got 2 spinners, right? Ravindra, Glenn Phillips. Maybe 1 spinner, 2 more seamers. And then we're dealing with like 6 or 7 high quality bowling options and a batting unit that goes all the way down to 7 or 8. This is crazy Kiwi cricket stuff. And I just want those 4 dudes in the same cricket team together. But my young seamers, not including Zach Foulkes and Nathan Smith, my seam all-rounders, Simon Keane, Jock McKenzie, Christian Clark, Will Clark, Luke Georgeson. So I've trimmed off Cameron Paul for Canterbury at the bottom of that group, and I've trimmed off Zach Foulkes and Nathan Smith from the top of that group. I've included Simon Keane, who has earned New Zealand A selection and has been pretty handy in the New Zealand A team so far, smashing boundaries down the order. Those 5 are my seaming all-rounders. Simon Keane, Jock McKenzie, both at Auckland. Christian Clark, ND. Will Clark, CD. Luke Georgeson, Otago. McKenzie, Clark, and Georgeson can all bat top 6 for their domestic teams. And the best bowlers here are Christian Clark, Jock McKenzie, Luke Georgeson. Simon Keane's the biggest hitter of that group. I think the best batter, to me, is Will Clark. And they all bowl right arm seam.
Well, we got Mohamed Abbas who can bowl some left arm seam just in one of those other groups already as well. So there's, if you need the variety, we've still got that.
Well, in that emerging batter group, Mohamed Abbas bowls left arm seam, as you just said. Dale Phillips bowls spin. Curtis Heafy's a wicketkeeper.
Variety the whole way through.
All the way through. That leaves 2 batters in that group. Bevan Jacobs is a T20 phenom who, thankfully, he's not scoring runs in T20 leagues, so everyone's chilling out about Bevan Jacobs. And then you got Reece Mariu, who is the best long-form batter we've seen in years. So all the pieces of that jigsaw fit together nicely. Didn't even mention Mitch Hay in that group. Didn't mention Matt Boyle. Kane Williamson's not in that group. Any of those groups, right? Like that's how you get beyond 35 cricketers pretty easily. So nice little brainstorming exercise there for Blackcaps cricket. And that will wrap us for the podcast today. Big up to you. We appreciate your eyeballs and eardrums. Enjoy the sporting action, crazy sporting time. So make sure you're having fun watching the sport, and don't do any sacrificing, don't do any blood magic, but do try and conjure the spirits for some all-white success and Warriors success at Mount Smart Stadium. Big up to you. Stay beautiful. Kia kaha. Church.